around here on your side.
CSX L333 can be seen backing around the Y off of the CSX Indy Line onto CSX's C&O Columbus Sub. The train would head south after getting back on the C&O. A GE is seen leading 3 EMDs for L333. Later tomorrow, this train will come back, pick up more cars, and head to Columbus. Shortly after L331 got out of the way, X331 is seen clattering the diamonds in Marion with a pretty foam lash-up. It was considered a lash-up of the year in 2022, with 2 CSX-8s, 2 SD70 flared Max, and 2 ET44 ACs sandwiching a UP Gevo. On another day, we find ourselves on the CSX Columbus Sub, this time in Linworth, a suburb of Columbus. We were hearing about a P001 coming to Columbus, so we went over to the C&O figuring he was over there. Instead, we caught this local heading southbound. The business train turned out to be over on the Scottslawn Secondary, so we moved over to a place called Kyle, known by rail fans and railroaders. It's actually called Kyleville. Here we see the business train, painted in B&O paint scheme livery heading southbound. On a separate, more colder day in Marion, we see hotshot train I-008 heading eastbound on the Indy Line. I-008 is daily Rose Lake, Illinois to North Bergen, New Jersey. He didn't blow his horn at the crossing because when he got close to it, the horn froze. While running through Marion, I-008 experienced issues with his second motor. At the industrial yard east of here, they would have to turn the third engine so they could put it in the lead, because they couldn't have the leader leading without a horn, and the second unit would be no good. So the third unit would become the first unit, the current lead unit would be the second, and the second unit would become the third. I know, it sounds pretty confusing. Near CP Ackerman on the C&O Sub, we witness L456 heading northbound. This is a daily Columbus, Ohio, Parsons Yard to Waltbridge, Ohio. The power will usually turn around the next day and come back as L457. Loaded ethanol train B651 heads southbound at Linworth. ethanol trains that run on CSX usually have a variety of power. Tonight was no different, with an NS-944 leading, a UP SD70M, and a BNSF SD70M in the green and white Executive Grinstein paint. A lot of these are getting either scrapped or painted over in the BNSF colors. Over on the Toledo Sub, we see northbound L424, a daily road local from Cincinnati to Lima, heading northbound as he's meeting two southbounds waiting in the Vandalia siding just north of us. L424 is known for his array of power, most of the time using SD40s, sometimes having seen with SD50s. And your occasional GEs. On this day, he had an empty welded rail train. This was going to the CF&E in Lima. CF&E would take it either to Fort Wayne or Chicago to get it loaded, then bring it back east to Lima to CSX's Robb Avenue yard, and then CSX would take that train on to somewhere else.
Signal indication when we get out of there and go sport right to Lima. Signal indication, won't pick it up. Sounds like a plan to me. I'm looking, here we go. CSX LA dispatcher check, still having 20929.
At MC Cabin on the south end of Dayton, daily Chicago to Cincinnati manifest M351 heads southbound. The leader is CSX 911, honoring first responders unit. It's using an AC-44 horn because a couple months prior, its original horn was stolen. M351's only work stop along its way out of Chicago is on the Garrett Sub in Garrett, Indiana. Once it reaches Deschler, it'll turn south onto the Toledo Sub and use the Toledo Sub all the way into Cincinnati. On another night at MC Cabin on the Toledo Sub, we observed manifest northbound M350, the counterpart to M351, northbound with a pair of AC-44 CWs. Following close behind 350 is empty ethanol train B840 out of Tampa, Florida, heading back to the BNSF in Chicago, with a BNSF War Bonnet leading the way and a BNSF in Heritage 1 paint second. At Sydney, Ohio, we came up here to observe the former Big Four station. At one time, the Indy Line was the New York Central's line from Indianapolis to Cleveland. Then it became Conrail. Penn Central was first before Conrail, and then CSX. A plaque serves up on the station if anybody wants to help try to preserve it. The tri-light signals here at Sydney are still up, but for how long, nobody knows. The CSX Toledo Sub flies by right underneath it, with a 4-mile double track. Here's a panoramic view from the connection that leads down to the Toledo Sub. And this little view here, taken just above the bridge that flies over the Toledo Sub. CSX had begun a program to replace all of its tri-lights along the Indy Line. These at 159 were eventually taken down just after we shot them. It was a nice and satisfying thing we did get them when we did, as we were able to get westbound rack train M205, Worcester, Massachusetts to Louisville, Kentucky. It'll make a left-hand turn at Sydney onto the Toledo Sub. At North Dayton on the Toledo Sub, just south of Needmore Yard, we observe rack train M209, who is coming loaded out of Walbridge, Ohio, to Louisville, Kentucky, heads southbound with an AC-44 leader. The boxcars that M209 and its counterpart 208 usually carry are of certain interest to some of us rail fans, because most of them still have the Conrail lettering and logos, and as of an additional bonus, with NYC reporting marks. Midway in the M209 is another AC-44CW under remote control from the head end. At BE 79.7 on the Toledo Sub, we find southbound manifest M511. He was originally Walbridge to Cincinnati, but now runs as Detroit to Cincinnati. He has an array of power with an ES40DC, an AC44CW, an SD40-2, an SD40-3, and 2 more SD40-2s. The 8335 being ex-Conrail 3000. The 4068 used to being an SD40. The 8479 being ex-Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, later Burlington Northern. And the 8833 being ex-Conrail number 6442. A lot of history lashed together between those three SD40s. A little bit later, we retreated to a nice site, The north end siding signal was flashing green, which was telling northbound M510 to go slow out of the siding onto the main. After the train fully cleared the switch, he could proceed at normal speed. This one was a real treat as it had two surprises. First, the CSX 3194 leading, painted to honor all law enforcement personnel, and the second one being a C44-8W, still in YN2 paint. At one point after 2019, you almost saw no CSX-8s running around. That's because most of them were all in storage or were getting rebuilt or cut up into pieces for scrap. But in 2022, CSX brought back the Dash 8 and some of their Dash 9s to help pull their increasing train service. That, and seeing one hooked up to a unit like this, made it a very special occasion. It's why we railfan, for lash-ups like this and many others that you don't normally get to see every day. Especially now in this day and age with PSR, those lash-ups are now becoming an almost impossibility. Our next catch is at milepost 138 on the CSX Indy Line in Bellefontaine, Ohio at night. We catch B520, who had just come off the Union Pacific in Salem heading to Newcastle, Pennsylvania, with a special treat, the Western Pacific Heritage Unit leading. The Indy Line will spit out many surprises here and there, like this one. B520 has emptied pipe loads going to Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Bellefontaine, if you don't know, is home to the shortest street in America, which has actually been named the shortest street in America if you look for the street sign. On another night, we observed B522 heading southbound at MC Cabin in Dayton, Ohio on the CSX Toledo Sub. The track in the foreground is the Norfolk Southern Dayton District. Since the NS Dayton District runs right next to the Toledo Sub in Dayton, we observe NS 179 heading westbound on the Dayton District. This train is daily Bellevue, Ohio to Irondale, Alabama manifest, with a clean Union Pacific rebuild leading. If you notice, that Union Pacific did not have the traditional flag logo on the side. UP is starting a new scheme to where they put the shield on the nose, the flag on the corner of the nose, and no flag on the side. UP is slowly starting to do this with all their locomotives. They haven't gotten through all of them yet, but they eventually will. we return to milepost 155 on the Indy Line. Sad to see and say that the tri-lights had been taken down and replaced. The tri-lights still sit on both sides of the tracks, but are not obviously intact anymore. As of the filming of this video, we have no idea if they have been hauled off from this location or not. With the new Vader signals in place here, we observe empty rack train M217, a daily Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to Louisville, Kentucky, split the signals. He'll make a left turn at Sydney. Milepost 155 had one tri-light still standing, and then on the other track, the tri-light had been taken down and replaced with the new Vader-style signals. The body of the tri-lights is seen laying there, with the head still intact. As of the uploading of this video, we have to assume that the tri-lights both had been removed and taken away. Moving more east, we end up in Quincy, where we still see more tri-lights standing. But, however, crews are putting in place the bases, and the new signals have already been delivered, so it's only a matter of time when those signals will be replaced. While we were here, we noticed an I&O high railer truck with track authority heading southbound on the former DT&I. An eastbound maintenance of way truck hauls a flat car with an excavator heading westbound at 153 on the CSX Indy Line. Unclear of where this destination is. I-008, an original Conrail train in the days of Conrail, heads eastbound through Quincy. This is a daily Rose Lake, Illinois to North Bergen, New Jersey, usually with truck trailers, but without any on this day. This is a view looking east at the Conrail tri-lights, viewing towards Bell Fountain. CSX westbound I-131 heads west at Quincy. This train had come out of Detroit, Michigan in the early morning hours during the dark and will go to Salem, Illinois to the Union Pacific. It usually has UP, KCS, or CN power. On this day, it had double UPs. We then took a trip up to Deschler, Ohio, where the Toledo Sub crosses the Willard Sub, which then becomes the Garrett Sub. It's a nice little view of the Crossroads Park. Excellent 24-hour viewing. That big area over there was where the B&O station once stood, but in August of 2022, the station was torn down. The tower still stands here and holds some CTC and PTC equipment for whenever the maintainers need it. This is another view looking west onto the Garrett Sub, which heads off towards Garrett, Indiana, and eventually Chicago. B650, empty ethanol out of Tampa Bay, Florida, turns off of the Toledo Sub and makes a left turn onto the Garrett Sub to go back to Chicago to the BNSF. Power today is a CSX Gevo, a Norfolk Southern Dash 9, and a Norfolk Southern C6M rebuild. On the other side of the diamond begins the Willard Sub east towards North Baltimore, Fostoria, and Willard. The green signal is for I-166, eastbound intermodal out of Schiller Park off the Canadian Pacific in Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, to Seneca Yard in Buffalo, New York. At Fairview Road in Carlisle, Ohio, milepost BE45 on the CSX Toledo Sub, we catch B522 with a pair of ET44AHs heading southbound. This train's destination is Middletown, Ohio. L24, led by a YN2 C40-8W, splits the pair of B&O CPL signals at the south end of the Tip City siding on the Toledo Sub. The Tip City siding, as you can see, has had its tracks ripped out except for the switches. Once the switches are gone, the signals will probably go as well. We decided to chase L24 to Troy, Ohio. Here he is passing in front of the old Baltimore and Ohio station. CSX rack train M205 heads southbound at Troy on the Toledo Sub. M205 came off the Indy Line at Sydney on the connection. The connection was built in place right before Conrail split between CSX and NS. CSX would not use the connection until after July 1st, 1999, when the split became official. Railfan friends Tyler Dixon in the middle and Steve Schuler on the left were in attendance on this day. CSX Intermodal I-141 heads south at Troy. Right in front of the silver box to the right is where the old P&E used to cross the B&O here and cross the P&T industrial track. That is no more though. 3 GEs lead I-141 south towards Cincinnati. At 139, known as Stockyard on the CSX Indy Line outside Bellefontaine, we see a double high green on both tracks for 2 eastbounds. The first one up is M204, loaded racks out of Louisville, Kentucky, headed to Buffalo, New York. Not long after 204, M332, daily Avon, Indiana to Cumberland, Maryland manifest and intermodal, heads eastbound at Bellefontaine, with some BNSF B40-8s and gensets all going to storage and scrap in Lordstown, Ohio. catch the same train again at a pair of tri-lights at QI 150. At CP 101 on the Indy Line, M217 can be seen westbound at AC Tower in Marion, preparing to cross the NS Sandusky Line diamond. Still in Marion, CSX Intermodal I-131 comes off the CNO line and prepares to turn west onto the Indy Line, with a CSX ES40DC and a Union Pacific SD70AH with shiny truck. M364 heads eastbound at Marion. At one time, the track to the farthest over there used to be the Erie Railway, and the closest to the NYC. G679 is seen on the Marion connection, turning off of the CNO and onto the CSX Indy Line. There, he'll turn south at Sydney and head on to Not long after G679, loaded coal train C700 is seen coming westbound. He'll make a south turn at Sydney. This train is coal loads out of Newell, Pennsylvania, and is heading for the coal plant in Stylesboro. M363, daily Selkirk, New York to Avon, Indiana manifest, heads westbound at CP 101 on the CSX